With the Owl House nearing its conclusion, I thought it would be good to look back on one of the show's standout episodes. If you ask me to name one episode that encapsulates why I hold the Owl House in such high regard, then it would have to be Knock Knock Knockin' on Hooty's door, as it honestly just feels like Dana Terrace and the production team were just flexing at this point, accomplishing something I never would have previously considered possible by centering an episode around Hooty, which on paper just seems like a really terrible idea, but yet somehow it's one of the best episodes in the entire show. I already touched on this back when we reviewed Separate Tides, but Hooty is a character who walks a fine line between being annoying to the other characters in a way that is humorous and endearing to the audience, and just flat out being annoying. Generally, he's most effective when confined to small doses of comic relief, which is why I had my doubts as to whether a Hooty-centric episode could work. I think the reason why Knock Knock Knockin' on Hooty's door gets away with it is because although the main conflict does revolve around Hooty, he only appears sparingly and his presence serves more as a framing device through which to explore the struggles of each of our main protagonists. Firstly, we have King, who is grappling with his sense of identity as Hooty attempts to help him discover what kind of a demon he is. This is the segment of the episode to most prominently feature Hooty, and his high-pitched voice does admittedly get a little grating here. Your mileage may vary depending on how much you can tolerate, but for me at least it's not enough to spoil the episode. What I do really like is how once again Dana Terrace and the writers do not feel the need to dumb down their characters or ignore their development in order to tell a simplistic moral. While perhaps a little cliche, the whole love yourself messaging could have worked fine in a different show, or even just in a different context, but that's not where King is at, and I appreciate that the show respects that and has him rightfully call Hooty out for being patronising. The next segment of the episode involves Ida eating some cookies, which thanks to Hooty have been laced with a drug that heightens dreams. Now I'm a sucker when it comes to weird, trippy dreamscape sequences, and this one, which through surreal imagery examines Ida's complex relationship with her owl beast curse, certainly does not disappoint. I've seen this read as being symbolic of depression, which I think is an entirely valid interpretation, but for me as a neurodiverse person I can also relate. For a long time I was ashamed and self-conscious of being autistic, much like Ida with her curse. It was the reason why I never fitted in or had any friends at school and essentially missed out on having a proper social life or doing most of the things teenagers are supposed to experience growing up, and I hated that. For a long time I felt the need to try and hide that aspect of myself, but in more recent years I've finally started to feel more comfortable in embracing my autism as part of my identity and what makes me who I am, and in doing so I like to think in my own way I have evolved and become Harpy Ida. So that brings us on to Lumity, and I have no issues with this segment. Back in my Enchanting Gromfright review I expressed some concern at the lack of progress with this arc and urged the writers to get on with it and actually have Luz and Amity get together, and to the show's credit, that's exactly what did happen, which leaves me with a problem, because I don't really see it as my place to be dishing out praise for LGBTQ representation in media, what with me not being a member of that community. That would just be kind of patronising, and also my voice isn't important. So what I'm going to do instead is bring on someone who is actually more qualified to talk about this subplot.
Count yourself lucky, Midnight. I wouldn't let just anyone or anything drag me out of retirement. Anyway, Lumity. Luminous, lovely, ludicrously lovable Lumity. While I did share some of Midnight's trepidations at the Grom episode, I was certainly more optimistic, and I'm glad to see the show validate that. Building on Amity's feelings towards the end of Season 1, and for the first half of Season 2, showing Luz reciprocated. These two bookworms just couldn't read each other's hearts. Seeing their attraction grow naturally, but also have them start dating before the finale is something very few straight romances even do. At least ones where the couple aren't together at the beginning. Having Luz and Amity grow not just into realizing their love for each other, but as a couple, opens up so much more story potential, and made me all the more invested in them. No joke, when they finally kissed, I squeaked so loud that one of my housemates knocked on my door to check I wasn't dying. I'm that invested. And crazy. But yeah, imagine a gay romance working by the same principles as a good straight one. Not to mention the extra validation of this episode showing it as just as important a personal conflict as growing up and learning to love yourself. As for Mighty Hootzifer's part, it definitely says something that he didn't think Amity was too cool and just yeeted the two together, showing he believes in Luz, even if his method was questionable. I also have to wonder if the Tunnel of Love was meant to reference some of the more overzealous or impatient shippers in the fandom, trying to push the two together before they're ready and just making things awkward. As bad as it is to drag out a romantic subplot, rushing it is just as counterproductive. If the two went from rivals to smooching within 2 or 3 episodes, it'd seem like the boiling hours were a different kind of weird than advertised, not to mention opening itself up to criticism of trying to get woke points or forced politics or crap like that. More likely it's to show kids not to be too forceful when helping friends with romantic issues, but still. I'm glad that the end result of Luz and Amity asking each other out and realizing how pointless the two worries were can be a message to both straight and queer people to not bottle up these kind of feelings. Especially when an all-seeing, nothing-knowing owl demon can try and push you together with hilariously awful wordplay. The ending having them confess while Hooty's wrecking stuff even says to me that it's important to love however you do, even under less than ideal circumstances. Something I reckon any queer person can relate to in this day and age. I honestly don't have much different to say about Lumity as a gay couple than I would if they were straight, but I think that's a very good thing. It's also why I love Rain just being there and valid and beautiful with their non-binary status just part of their character. Far too often have queer characters been pushed to the side, either killing them or just underplaying their story. Even my favourite show of all time fell into this, as Midnight eloquently critiqued with the 13th Doctor and Yaz. I could go on for ages about Blake and Yang's Schrödinger's ship in Ruby, or Netflix promoting the hell out of Voltron's Shiro and Adam, only to kill the latter before they had any worthwhile conversations, but Dad Rex taught me better than to hijack someone else's video when you're a guest. Deanna Terrace's courage in the face of Disney cutting her show short is admirable, not letting it scupper her plans, but instead say, screw it, and use the time she has left as best she can for her vision. I both hope that future writers in and or writing for marginalized groups share that bravery, but also don't have to face as terrible a situation. Thanks, Midnight.
What's really impressive about Knock Knock Knockin' on Hooty's Door is that it didn't need to exist. Dana Terrace and the production team didn't need to do this. They could have just played it safe and not done a whole episode centered around Hooty and it still would have been really good. But accomplishing something more tricky to pull off shows ambition and conviction on the part of the writers, as well as versatility. It's the same reason I admire BoJack Horseman for having an episode be set almost entirely underwater with no dialogue, or having another episode be one long eulogy because why not? It's the sign of a creative team who are fully invested in what they are doing and operating at the top of their game, something which you don't always get, especially in children's entertainment. And that's why Knock Knock Knockin' on Hooty's Door is a perfect showcase of what makes the Owl House so great. This is Midnight Chimes, still waiting for the last train home. If you would like to support this channel, then head over to my eBay store where I sell lots of nerdy things. I'll put the link in the description below. Thank you.